What's up everyone, welcome back to another episode of AWS tutorial, and today I'm going to show you how to build a service that is just like ChatGPT, where you can ask it a question and then it's going to use your prompt to call the AI model in the background and then generate a response and then return it back to you. I think this project is very interesting and it's going to be very helpful for your career or your side project, because right now AI is the hot topic. Everything that we do or the company does is related to AI. And the architecture that we're going to build today is pretty simple actually. We have an API gateway that takes your response and then it's going to call the Lambda function. And then the Lambda function is going to call Bedrock in the background that uses AI models to generate response and then return back to you. And I'm going to show you how to build this step by step. So without further ado, let's get to it. Okay, so right now I'm on the homepage of the AWS console. And the core service that we're going to use for the tutorial is called Amazon Bedrock. So we're going to type in Bedrock and then click on it. And this should be the welcome page. So let's take a look at what models that they provide first. So on the side panel here, we have foundation models. So let's take a look at the base models. So here you can look at the descriptions of each of them. We have cloud by entropy, which provides different types of models. You can read more about it. And then Cohere command provides a generative LLM command that can generate text-based responses based on the prompts. And I think that's exactly what we need because we just try to do something simple where we can ask questions in text and then we're gonna get a response back from the model. So this is what we're gonna use later on in the tutorial. But let's take a look at other models as well. This one is also provided by Cohere, Embed, and then Jurassic 2, and then Lamar. This is pretty famous, provided by Meta. This one is pretty powerful too. If you look at the models here, you have Lamar 2, which is 13 billion parameters. This one is 70 billion parameters. And then, yeah, 70 billion parameters. They're pretty big, so pretty powerful models here. And then you can read on other ones as well. So I'm not going to go through one by one. And so before we can use it, the first thing that we have to do is request access to the models that you want to use. So you need to scroll down to model access here on the model, on the bottom. And these are the ones that are available to request. So if this is the first time that you're using it, you should be able to see that you don't have access to any of them. So right now we're going to request it. So we're going to click on enable all models. So it's going to check all of it for you and then hit next. Add use case details for entropy. Oh, so apparently for entropies, you need to fill out some information. So let's not select that because we don't really need that model. So we're going to go back and then uncheck entropy. So hit next so that they don't ask us informations. Okay, so we're going to hit submit. Okay, access request for 2 models failed. It's all right. We don't need those ones. We just need, like I mentioned with Cohere, we're just gonna need these ones. It's still in progress. So while we are waiting for the access to be approved, we can work on other parts of the project, and then we're gonna come back here to make sure that it was enabled before we move on. So the first thing that we need to do is we're gonna create an IAM role for the Lambda function to use. I'm gonna type in IAM and then rows, create a new row. And then for the service, we're gonna choose Lambda function because the Lambda is gonna use it. And we're gonna add 2 permissions to it. The first one is Bedrock, of course. For this demo, I'm just gonna give it full access. And then the second one is CloudWatch Log. CloudWatch Log full access. That as well because we want to be able to see details of the logs. Hit next. Okay, now we can see that we have 2 access attached to it, or 2 policies attached to it. ChatGPT Lambda row. But you can choose whatever name you want it to be. Then hit create. Okay, so that is done. And then step number 2 is to create a function for writing the code. So we're gonna go to Lambda, create a function. For the name, we're gonna give it ChatGPT Lambda, something like that. And we're gonna use Python. Let's do ARM64. And then we're going to choose the row that we just created. ChatGPT row is right here. Hit create. Okay, the creation is done. But before we move on to the next step, I'm gonna increase the timeout because the default is only 3 seconds. Typically, it doesn't take a whole lot of time, but I'm just gonna increase it to 2 minutes just in case. Memory, maybe 500. And then hit save. Okay, so the Lambda function is done. And now we're gonna go to API gateway to create an endpoint so that we can call into it. So in today's tutorial, I'm just gonna focus on the creation part of it or the implementation part of the API gateway. But if you want to learn more about how API gateway works or how to add access control to it, I can provide a couple videos that I had previously that you can watch about it and learn more about it yourself in your free time. So this is the homepage of it, and the type of API that we're gonna choose today is REST API. So make sure that you choose this one. It's very important. So we're gonna do build new API, and then for the name we're gonna do GPT API, and then keep it as regional. Create API. We're gonna create a resource. We're gonna do say ask, something like that, and make sure that you check the course here. Hit create, and then create method. So the method we're gonna create to call the Lambda function is gonna be post, because we need to pass in a request body which contains the prompt and the Lambda function. And then make sure that we check Lambda proxy integration. This is very important. And then the Lambda function, which is whatever region that you created in. For me, it was East 1, US East 1. And then this is the one that we created. So choose that, default timeout. And then we just keep everything as default. Hit create. So it's done. So we have a post method here. And now let's go back to Bedrock to see if it's done yet. Okay, so you see that code here. All the access were granted, so I think it's ready to be used. Yep, that's right. And now we're ready to move on to the next step, which is to write the Lambda code to call the AI model and then generate a response and return back to the client. And I'm going to write everything from scratch so we can follow along as well. So let's get to it. Okay, so right now I have VS Code, open a empty folder called tutorial. So we're going to create a Lambda function .py file here. First thing first, we're going to import some modules that we're going to use. The first one is Bodo3, and then the second one is JSON. And then we're going to define Bedrock, Bodo3.client, and then service name, Bedrock dash runtime, and then region, US East 1, and then model ID. So since we use cohere, the model ID is going to be cohere.command text v14. I'm going to show you how to get this information later on, but right now just use this as is. And then we're going to define a function called Lambda handler, which takes in an event object and a context object as inputs. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to print out what the event is for debugging purposes if there's any issue. So we're actually going to do json.dom event. So that prints it out in a nice format. And then we're going to extract the request body from our event object. That body like that. And then we're going to extract the prompt, which is the question that we ask, from the request body. And now we're going to construct our own request body to call the AI model using Bedrock. So it takes in the prompt, obviously, and then max token. Let's just give it 400. And then temperature 0.75. I'm going to show you where to find the definitions for all these parameters, but let me finish typing it first. And then a p-value, let's do 0.1, and then a k-value of 0. And then I think it has a stub sequence as well, and which we don't have any. And then return likelihood, none. And now let me show you where to find the definitions for all these. Okay, so if you go to the AWS documentation page for Bedrock, I'll provide this link in the description down below so you can take a look at it later. On the side here, you can find the model inference parameters definitions here. Since we're using the Cohere models here, you can expand it. And we're using the Cohere command models. So in here, this is how the request body looks like, and that's exactly what we just typed. We have the prompt, temperature, PK, max token, and all that. And then below that, you can find the definition for each of them. So you can read through them if you want. The value that I just input or I just wrote was a pretty common ones, but you can fine tune them based on your use case and based on your trial error as well. But this is where you find the definition of them. Okay, so now let's go back to the code. So this is our request body to the AI model, and now we can use it to call the Bedrock service. So we're gonna get a response back from Bedrock, and the way that we're calling it is invoke model, and then it takes in a model ID, which is the model ID that we define, which is the Cohere model ID. And then the second parameter would be body, and make sure that you do json.doms, and then accept. We're just gonna accept everything, and then content type, we're gonna get application JSON, so it's easy to parse. Okay, the calling of it is pretty simple, and now we are ready to extract the response body to see what the response looks like, and then return it back to the client who is calling it. So response json.loads Bedrock response. We're gonna take the response body of it, and the data type of it is gonna be a stream. So we have to do a .read on it to convert that into like a text or string, and then it will have a generations parameter inside it, which is a list, and we always just take the first one, and then we're gonna take the text of it, and then return it back to the user. And then the API response that we're gonna return to API gateway is, we have a status code 200, and then body. We're gonna do a JSON.dom, which is a object as well. We're gonna return back what the prompt is, because we want to let the user know that, oh, this is what you ask. And then the response from the AI is this response. And then we're just gonna return API response. Okay, that's it. It's pretty simple. And now we're ready to copy and paste this code into the Lambda function and test it out. So go back to the Lambda function, code, delete everything, paste, and then hit deploy. Actually, one thing I forgot to do when we configured the API gateway is that I forgot to deploy that into a stage. So that's not gonna work yet. So now let's go back to API gateway. We're gonna go back to the root and then hit deploy API. We're gonna create a new stage, just do dev, and then hit deploy. Okay, so it got deployed successfully. So this is our API endpoint that we're gonna call, and then it's gonna call the Lambda function to generate a response to us. So let's copy this and then go to Postman, paste it here. Remember, our method is post, and then we have a resource of ask. So we need to do /ask, and then the method is post, and then it takes in a request body. And remember, in our Lambda function here, is taking it in as the prompt attribute. So inside our request body, we're gonna have something called prompt, and we're gonna ask a question. So to test it out, let's just say hello. So when we call this, it should be hitting our API gateway, and then it will call the Lambda function, and the Lambda function would call the AI model to get a response and then respond back to me. So let's test it out. Internal server error. Let's see what happened. So let's take a look at the log. Unexpected key argument region. I think I know why. It's not region, it should be a region name. It's a typo here. Okay, hit deploy. Okay, it's deployed successfully. And now let's test it one more time. Oh hey, look at that. It says hi. How can I help you today? Seems like it's working, at least for the first one. So now let's ask it more real questions. So let's ask, help me write a short paragraph to introduce myself in a job interview, please. Okay, let's see what it comes up with. Aha, look at that. It's like, oh, here's a sample of introductions you can use in a job interview. Hello, my name is blah blah blah. I'm excited to be here today, blah 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 blah. Okay, seems like it's pretty decent. Now let's ask something more scientific. Let's say, what is Newton's third law? Okay, Newton's third law of motion states that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. And the definition of it. Okay, seems pretty accurate. And now let's ask something more normal or generic. How many states are there in the US? Okay, there are 50 states in the United States, blah blah blah, and then it includes some. Oh, it listed out all these states here as well. Okay, that's cool. And it's also asked, would you like to know more about the United States? So you can ask follow-up questions if you want to. Seems pretty cool. So this is it. You have learned how to build a ChatGPT on your own, and it took pretty short time. And it's pretty helpful and powerful because you can use that or integrate that into your website or your app to make it more intelligent. So yeah, this is it for today's tutorial. If you learned something from today's tutorial, I hope you can give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video.